Did Colby Covington break Kamaru Usman's 100% takedown defense record at UFC 268? Kamaru Usman admits Colby Covington took him down in the third round of their UFC 268 fight. Kamaru Usman's takedown defense is still 100%. Did Colby Covington break Kamaru Usman? Kamaru Usman admits Colby Covington took him down. Why Covington wasn't the one to take down Kamaru Usman and Colby.
Who gives a shit?
Hello. Gentlemen, ladies, or at least imaginary ones, the ones I hope are present in the audience. Hello and welcome to TENGRIDOME, episode whatever. I'm your host Iggy, and today we're gonna recap UFC 268 in a very calm and measured and balanced manner. I'm gonna stay calm. I'm gonna try and build a nuanced picture of the events that happened at UFC 268. But before we do so, all the main fighters. It was kind of like a Trevor Wittman derby, I guess. Though, when you say derby, that usually means that all the competitors are competing against one another. But anyway. Basically, it was Rose Namajunas, Justin Gaethje, and Kamaru Usman who were there. And all are Wittman fighters now. Usman moved to Wittman's quite a while ago, and has been training with him ever since. And it's a bit of a controversial subject in terms of did Wittman improve Kamaru Usman? Did Wittman make Kamaru Usman worse? At least at TFS it is a controversial subject because we keep arguing back and forth whether or not the trade-off of Usman no longer being so razor-focused strategically on being a grindy pressure guy versus becoming a more well-rounded striker was beneficial at all, because tactically, yes, it may seem like an obvious improvement. Like on the surface, it's obvious that being a better striker is better if you want to be better as a fighter. However, whenever you kind of sacrifice your strategic focus in favor of acquiring new tactical looks, it may be a mixed blessing. And we'll talk about this as we get into the breakdown for the actual fights. And with Rose Namajunas, yes, she has improved a lot at Wittman's. However, she seems to be repeating that same pattern of Wittman fighters kind of like turning into mid-range boxer punchers that looking for big counters, which frequently costs them the initiative and frequently costs them certain opportunities they may have pursued had they not been so preoccupied with sort of like moving around their opponent as opposed to moving around the cage. What do I mean by that? So, like at Hoofd's, Usman pursued a very clear directionality in the fight. The idea was to always press his opponents up against the cage and then punish them there. And at ever since he came to Wittman's, he now moves around his opponent rather than he doesn't really pick a directionality in which he wants the fight to go on. He just kind of like goes with the flow of it, and it can work. It can work wonderfully, as some of Usman's prior fights under Wittman have shown. However, there's also the side effect of the fighter kind of like conceding space for no reason, which we saw Osman do, and and we saw Gagey do that as well as Namajunas at points, and it's really a shame because Justin Gaethje is also obviously for the largest stretch of his career, for the majority of his career, he was like a quintessential pressure ass warmer, you know, and then he turned into a back foot counterpuncher, and he looked fine doing that, except against Khabib, but and you can be, it's absolutely fine to become a back foot fighter. If you know what you're doing, you can absolutely win fights off the back foot. It's not like an indictment or like a death sentence. It's just hard, you know. But in this one, Gagey kind of like took center cage and maintained his position there, which allows him to find more opportunities to punish Chandler for his lunges rather than as opposed to if he went completely on the back foot. And the problem with the back foot, especially among Wittman fighters, is that they're just not very good off the back foot. Just the movement is just not very efficient because kind of like someone like Eddie Alvarez was very good at fighting off the back foot, and obviously Jose Aldo is excellent at fighting off the back foot. But the difference is that Alvarez was very disciplined with his foot movements, and he was very good at changing directions, like showing that he's gonna exit one way and then darting out the other. And Jose Aldo just plain stood his ground and never conceded space for free. If you were going to try and press him back, press him to the cage, you're probably gonna have to walk through like absolute hell to do that. And the reason why Yan won their fight was that Yan was able to actually outposition him and outmaneuver him and kind of like weather the storm in the pocket. Anyway, so all three fighters kind of like have their problems. One, the problems are more pronounced for certain fighters rather than others, and like vice versa and all that kind of stuff. You get the idea. Okay. I guess now we can actually start talking about the main event, which was Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington 2. Not going to waste any time here. I think there's some concepts we can explain on the go, on the fly. All right, so basically, what did Kamaru Usman need to do? Basically a repeat of the first fight, except harder and better, and get hit way less. And he could have done that, because he's way superior at range, especially after training at Wittman's. He's now an okay-ish mid-range boxer. And Colby Covington was kind of like very tentative and oddly passive for the first couple rounds, and basically all that happened was that Colby got his ass beat. Like, got knocked around from pillar to post, almost got finished. He was laying curled up on the ground after a Kamaru Usman left hook, and ready to go out. But Kamaru Usman, for whatever reason, didn't press the issue. I don't know if it's a psychological thing. Maybe he wanted to like create a neat bookend where he beats Colby Covington up for 5 rounds and then finishes him late, that kind of stuff. Fighters are susceptible to that sort of thinking at times. It doesn't excuse that it's happened. It doesn't excuse that these things happen. It's a dumb decision, quite frankly. But these things, they happen. They tend to happen in combat sports. So basically, really bad decision making by Kamaru overall. Like, he didn't press the issue, abandoned the body attack. He landed several times with the uppercut to the body, with which he pretty much completely deflated Colby Covington in the first fight, and in this one, each time he connected, Colby Covington was sent reeling backwards, and never went back to it. Maybe because he had so much success headhunting. I don't know. So Colby somehow finds his way back into the fight after the third round, despite his own offense being completely ineffectual, and Usman completely lost control of the optics by the end. And the thing why this is so frustrating is that Usman absolutely dominated that fight. He absolutely kicked Colby Covington's ass. Like, no question. Zero question about it, but he lost. The optics were so terrible for him, and the commentary was so atrocious that we are now getting all these narratives, as all the narratives that we tend to get after a big card like that, after a big fight like that. People arguing about takedown percentages. People arguing about significant strikes landed. Statistics, numbers, and body language analysis, all that kind of bullshit. And the thing is, none of it fucking matters, because Usman damn near fucking killed Colby Covington in there. And like Colby had no business coming on strong late. Like zero business doing that. And this was like the tentative jittery version of Colby with a cracked chin. The version of Colby that got dropped multiple times. The version of Colby that didn't even pursue his win condition early on. Like he was too fucking anxious about entering range against Usman that he kind of like danced around on the outside and then started barging in with the ugliest uppercuts you could imagine. The most annoying thing is that it worked. Like basically, in the first time around, the jab to body attack combination ruined Colby, like in the first fight. And again, all Usman had to do was just basically like create a tighter repeat of that first performance. Like, and the problem why I think this happened is that Usman got too preoccupied with his fancy new looks acquired at Wittman's, while forgetting that his defensive reactions in the pocket are still largely nascent. And at this stage in his career, honestly, I think they're likely to never develop to a level where he can comfortably react to strikes on the fly. Like at this stage in his career, I don't think it's possible. And so Colby managed to find an avenue past Usman's far superior attack at range by just, well, he basically just kind of like darted in, throwing like straight arm uppercuts. It's the ugliest thing ever, except it worked because Usman's head movement is largely consists of exaggerated ducks and slips, like way over exaggerated, like way out of proportion. He reacts to strikes. Like first of all, he never had the best reaction to strikes in general. Like he would get hit and then he would start chasing bees, like get the fuck away from me. And now that he's trained at Wittman's, he kind of like started developing some head movement, some actual head movement, like trying to like slip to the side and kind of like move his head a little bit. But he only does that when no strikes are coming in. He just kind of like it's his new idol in the animation. And while his progress is impressive, because he's not a natural striker at all, he's not a natural, comfortable striker, like by any measure, but he was still, through constant work, he has been able to improve, and there are certain areas where he looks incredibly good, but he's still, like, his in the pocket is still atrocious. Like his reactions and his optics, kind of like, they do most of the work for his opponents in terms of judging. Like whenever a judge sees Kamaru Usman get hit, he sees Kamaru Usman like kind of like closing his eyes, ducking like way down, and looking like I don't know, he just got stung in the eyes. Just terrible. Usman reacts to strikes as if each punch is like the size of his torso, you know? And the fist is like, it's this tiny thing. All you need is kind of like, just move your head a little bit to the side and you're gonna evade the punch. But some people just have this ingrained reaction that is very hard to get rid of. I mean, for a pound-for-pound number one, I'd say this was quite frankly, a shocking performance. If I were Usman's head coach, I'd be screaming my fucking head off right now. Because really, this is a strategic failure. Like, you do not let the fight go from a guy laying curled up on the ground after 2 rounds of getting his entire shit pushed in, to people saying that the guy who was laying on the ground, almost completely knocked out, arguably stole the championship rounds. The people are wrong, but they're still gonna say this. They're still saying that. They're saying it right now. And, like, I'd be way less harsh if the guy in question wasn't, like, a total stylistic layup. Like, and if Usman didn't win comfortably by all sane metrics, it's just that the optics are, like, complete dog shit. And optics and framing, like, matter quite a bit at this level, you know? At least for your reputation and legacy. It's kind of like, I mean, I guess psychologically, Colby Covington isn't really a layup for Usman, because against Colby, he just fucking refuses to use his grappling, even though he just, like, obviously is way superior on the ground than Colby. It's like Dara Nugent, one of a friend of the site, Dara, talked about how, like, Colby was designed in the lab for Usman to clearly win while looking like a fucking dumbass. And I tend to agree. That's really the crux of the whole thing. Everything else is kind of like the nitty gritty nuts and bolts of that matchup kind of like don't matter all that much. Except, I guess, the problem with Usman striking that he's developed at Wittman. Like, many Wittman fighters tend to develop this kind of like fascination with their own technical ability, if you will. Like, both Rose and Usman utilize lots of head slot feints, by which I mean they kind of like shift their head to a different position to bait a reaction out of your opponent. That's normally how you should use a head slot feint. With them, I'm not sure that's the case. I think they just do that because they're kind of like thinking, oh, I guess this is what technical fighters do. I'm now technical. I'm supposed to be technical. I'm going to do technical shit. And so they use stutter step feints where you kind of like move forward with your feet, like in these teensy tiny little steps to kind of like create the impression that you're gonna throw an attack, because this accelerates your tempo in movement. Like, normally you would move like this is you moving around your opponent, kind of like moving your head, and then before your attack or before you launch an attack, you kind of like throw a feint, like this little stutter step, and they do that a lot, except they do that from like 30 feet away. So it serves no actual real purpose. So essentially it's pointless. You're not supposed to do that at a distance where your opponent cannot hit you. You first you have to enter range. First you have to establish your distance. And then you use all that to prepare your attacks. Not the other way around. You don't abandon all that shit the moment the exchange happens. But this is just something that needs to be ingrained over hundreds and hundreds of hours of sparring and training and drills. I'm now starting to wonder if Justin Gaethje just styles on both Rose and Usman in sparring, and that's why they cannot develop any like ingrained proper defensive reactions. I don't know. I mean, the thing is, not to be like super harsh on Trevor Wittman, coaches and fighters frequently focus on very specific areas of skill development, which leaves them with no time to break down and analyze concepts like ringcraft and footwork from a strategic standpoint. And fighters frequently have no time to take a step back and reflect on what they've learned because of the sheer because of how relentless the UFC schedule tends to be. However, I would still say that it is a huge flaw on part of many an MMA coach in that they do not think about fights in these terms, in terms of like directionality. Where do you want the fight to go and why do you want it? And in terms of ringcraft, like in which positions should I corral my opponent in order to hurt them or like establish a distance that is beneficial for me, like hammering these concepts into their fighters' heads. It's very likely that the coaches may understand these things. They're very well, they should be, at least, to have a license, for fuck's sake. But the fighters do not quite, you can count the amount of fighters who understand these things on the fingers of one hand. And maybe there is more, except they're not able to implement it well. And we see that this even at the championship level. Like, if you go back to Hoft's Usman, and if you look at someone like, let's say, for example, Gilbert Burns, a lot of Hoft fighters, this is something our Discord patron, Bronan, pointed out, like, a lot of Hoft fighters tend to understand their limitations. Like, okay, they have the same, they have, they may be more road than Wittman fighters, and that is kind of like an indubitable fact. But they have setups, kicks, and combinations that work really well when they put them together. But since Usman is one of those fighters that needs to think less to be successful, he's like, it was obvious that he thinks before he throws, and now he tries to be even more thoughtful in terms of his striking and shot selection, which takes a long while. It takes a long while for him to register what he needs to throw before he actually throws it. You know, thinking is slow. Human brains are slow. If you think in a fight, you're gonna be slow. That's just how it is. That's why it's kind of like a trade-off between being... It's a balancing act between having ingrained rote reactions, where it's something that you just throw at a hair trigger, and when you like kind of like specifically look for the opening. And you can lessen the amount of time you need to think about openings by practicing constantly. It's kind of like one of those things. It can be an ingrained attribute. Just you have an eye for the counter, you have an eye for an opening. But with most people, practice is all it takes, and I am not sure that's basically, like, the older a fighter gets, I mean, for lack of a better term, the more calcified his brain becomes, and trying to master extremely like technical, thoughtful striking at this stage in your career, I mean, it's an admirable endeavor. It's admirable that Usman has been able to develop all these neat looks, but it still came at the cost of something. That's what I think. It's like Haxerize talked about this. We had a lengthy discussion after the fight where we talked about all the benefits and flaws of training at Wittman. Like, Ryan talked about how Wittman instills great pocket work in his fighters, but he like either he tries to turn them into mid-range pocket boxers, or it's like by virtue of his instruction, the fighter kind of like either misinterpret what he's trying to say and then kind of like develop into this mold on their own. It's like I said in the beginning, they move around their opponents rather than around the cage, and the problems what they have on the back foot and all that kind of stuff. Like, it can work great for some fighters, but Usman's style doesn't really just gel with it all that well. And Hax talked about how, like, if you listen to Wittman's corner advice, if you listen to what he actually says, like, he says like something like, use forward pressure to get them swinging, and then counter. Use their forward pressure so you can counter, then push forward. And Wittman fighters are like, I am now technical. I am technical. I'm gonna walk backwards. I'm gonna walk backwards all the time and counter because I'm being very technical. Then I can only pressure when I have to, which makes me the most technical fighter of them all. And it's like, fucking no. It's like, you have to use this stuff in tandem just to make sure it works most of the time. You know, basically what I'm saying is that Wittman fighters get preoccupied, get obsessed with slickster shit without really understanding what makes slicksters tick. That's all there is to it. Like, trying to be sharp at range where you can get hit, while your reactions are still very unnatural and like you have to think about them and you're very uncomfortable at that range. It basically just turns the fights more competitive than it has to be. Yeah. Like this, and the lack of urgency after the second round after he knocked him down. It's just weird. It just shows kind of like this lack of killer instinct that I very much enjoy seeing fighters display, and this time Usman didn't. Kind of let Colby off the hook, which is alarming. Not damning. I'm not saying Usman is washed, or that he's shit now, or that he sucks now because he didn't like get Colby out of there. I'm just pointing out all the flaws that kind of worry me a little bit. And I think these flaws need to be addressed if Osman is to continue being pound for pound number one. And Rose Namajunas displayed much of the same problems in her fight against Zhang Weili. And but the thing is, it's kind of a common theme in that Usman, and that Wittman, instills great process in his fighters, but the idiosyncrasies still shine through and then kind of like hurt the implementation of that process. So it's not like Wittman is solely to blame for their flaws. It would be unfair. But Namajunas kind of looks worse in every rematch that she's ever had. Like her first fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk sparks her out early. Second fight, incredibly competitive throughout the distance. It goes the distance and it remains incredibly competitive throughout the fight. Arguably lost a lot of the rounds, and arguably Joanna Jędrzejczyk has won that one. Also, another fight where the commentary was going on and on about round stealing takedowns, which isn't a thing, by the way. A takedown means absolutely nothing. It means zero, zilch, because the criteria is based on damage. If you take someone down, land no damage, and basically like hang out in top control, you're not scoring anything. And if the guy on bottom is hitting you like with elbows and slicing you up, then that's the guy who's winning. Except with most judges, they tend to like kind of still think, oh, this guy is on top, so that means he's probably winning. No, it's not. It doesn't mean that. But it's a problem we've had for ages. Kind of like, I get tired of repeating that every time, but what the fuck are you gonna do? And this one, like, sparks Zhang early, and now struggles with her for 5 rounds. Zhang also looked like dog shit, quite frankly. Like, what's a technical stand-up? I don't know what's that. I don't know what that means. I'm gonna bicycle kick from bottom. And she was ostensibly training with Henry fucking Cejudo. And still, she did not know how to get up from underneath Rose, who, just to point out, does not have the best top control at strawweight. The commentary was also pretty fucking ludicrous. I mean, it was terrible throughout the whole event because it was fucking Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier, and DC is kind of atrocious on his own. He's pretty fucking bad. And half the things he says about wrestling are frequently wrong. But whenever Joe Rogan shows up in there with him, like, the last of Daniel Cormier's halfway worthwhile thoughts kind of like retreat into the basement of his mind and kill one another to fulfill a suicide pact. That's what happens. Just completely buying into whatever narrative that Joe Rogan cooks up. I don't know why. Maybe it's the connection that they share as fellow bald men. Because, like, Joe Nanek is kind of like the neutral energy. He has the neutral Jing from Avatar, and Joe Rogan is like positive Jing, and DC is negative Jing, or whatever. And it's the interplay. They compile the perfect like circle of shittiness together. John Anik is not shit, by the way. John Anik is the best of them. That's why he's neutral. He's always trying to do his job, and Rogan and DC like are basically there to interfere with his process. Well, yeah, I kind of zoned out during that one. I kind of people are up in arms about scoring, what scores and what doesn't, who won which round. I don't fucking care. I think they both should have lost. It was just fucking boring. Did not enjoy that one. Did not enjoy that one. And anyway, there was Shane Burgos versus Billy Quarantillo. Excellent fight, really great fight. Billy Quarantillo, not quite the athlete Burgos is, but a spirited showing as always, nonetheless. Very annoyed this didn't also get some kind of bonus because fucking Dana White. Because Dana White. Do I need to say more? Anyway, the reasons why Burgos has gets into scraps with absolutely everyone is that he kind of tries to fight like he's 2 heads shorter than he actually is. It's very weird. Also, not sure I've enjoyed watching him. So, watching him return to the octagon so quickly after the Barboza knockout and the Barboza beating, because it was just so alarming the way he fell. Kind of looked like, I've talked about this before, but I've talked about this on the immediate post-fight breakdown, but whenever someone falls like that in boxing, you kind of presume that he's gonna fucking die afterwards. Gonna just collapse in the changing room, and that's gonna be it. Thankfully, it didn't happen. Still too early for him to fight, I think, but what are you gonna do? Anyway, a quintessential Burgers performance, really. If you're elite, you're gonna have a scrap with him. If you're not elite, you're still gonna have a scrap with him. That's his main problem. Still a great fight, though. Kind of a shame that the crowd seemed to be completely burnt out after watching Chandler versus Gagey, which is frankly fight of the year material. Up there with Gagey's bouts with Alvarez and Poirier. I would say as much. I would say this much. And there was also Frankie versus Cheetah. Kind of sad because Frankie is fucking old. Incredibly old. Cheetah, Frankie was top gaming Cheetah for much of that fight, but then he got turned into the lazy monkey from those terrible NFTs by a Cheetah Vera front kick. And finally, of course, for me, it was the real main event of the card: Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje. And what can I say? It was a quintessential Justin Gaethje fight, a genuine, real, in all senses of the word, a real treat, a real Gaethje fight, a fucking Gaethje fight. Haven't seen one for a fucking year. Justin Gaethje is not the kind of fighter you marinate. He's not the kind of fighter that you can shelve for a little bit and then depend on him looking good after he comes back, because I think Justin Gaethje is the fighter who benefits the most from fighting often, fighting constantly. And Justin Gaethje should be headlining every fucking fight night card in existence. Fight night Oshkosh, Justin Gaethje main eventing. Fight night fucking Broadhead, Justin Gaethje main eventing. It's a flawless business strategy. Just have Justin Gaethje fight often. Let him get top billing. He's not gonna disappoint you. I think it's historically established that Justin Gaethje is fun. He's a fucking fun fighter. If you're gonna put him on your card, you're gonna have fun. Even if he loses. In some cases, especially if he loses. There was always this talk about Justin Gaethje being overrated. I don't know, the level of backlash that Justin Gaethje received and the amount of hatred he received when he started rising up the ranks. It's bizarre. I do not understand it. I do not understand where it's coming from, where it came from, and why it even exists. Justin Gaethje is not overrated, you know. Justin Gaethje, if anything, he overperformed. Because for ages, everyone was talking about how he's shit, how he's like a Homer Simpson that eats every shot that's coming at him, how he's dog shit at defending, how he's dog shit in the pocket, all that kind of stuff. And look at him right now, hanging in there with real elites. I've actually made an entire episode about Justin Gaethje revisionism. I think it was like episode like 13 or 12. I don't know. I've made an episode on him. I've always liked him because he seems like the most brutally honest the fighter with the least amount of delusions. Like even as early in his career, like he was always talking about how he's gonna get knocked the fuck out, and when he got knocked the fuck out, he was like, what are you gonna do? And also all the moments where he was like, I wanna die. Like other fighters are always like, oh yeah, if you got the right mindset, pain isn't real. Like pain don't hurt. Got the mindset, pain don't hurt. And Justin Gaethje is like always like, yeah, fucking fighting hurts as like fuck. It's very painful. Everything is painful. Existence is painful, and I fucking love it. That's just who he is. But to tie this all gushing to the theme I wish to explore, I think. I personally think that Gagey is the fighter out of all Wittman fighters showcased that night. I think Justin is the one with the strongest identity from them all, and it's one of those things that kind of like they may sound like a lot of woo, but fighter styles depend a lot on their personality. So, and we talked about this with Conor Rebush. Conor Rebush talked about this on Heavy Hands a lot, but. Justin Gaethje being Justin Gaethje helped him avoid a lot of the pitfalls Rose and Usman fell into. Like for example, Rose and Usman used lots of fancy pivots, all the head slot feints, like I've talked about, the starter steps, and everything I've just described is performed for no good reason at all, and then they get bombed in the pocket anyway. Zhang Weili was like, she has atrocious punching mechanics, yet she was still connecting a lot in the pocket against Rose. Gagey, however, yeah, he's consistently more efficient. He showcased some neat new boxing tricks here and there. Particularly his uppercut to left hook combo looked very crisp. But it's still janky old Gagey, fighting his janky old fight. Because Michael Chandler, everyone was like, the main concern about Chandler was that his durability just isn't there anymore, and it suddenly made it like a triumphant return. And there's some caveats to that, but it's still an incredibly tough fight, and Michael Chandler was a lot faster, he's more explosive, and he hurt Gagey multiple times because he kind of exploited Gagey's also janky defensive reactions. They're pretty good, but they're still janky. And also one thing, Michael Chandler is constantly billed as being 5'8". No, he's fucking not. Like, there are photos of him standing next to T.J. Dillashaw, and T.J. Dillashaw looks like the taller man. You know, Michael Chandler is probably like 5'5". I mean, heights in MMA are just plain weird a lot of the time. They're just wrong. Rozenstruik was billed as being 6'3", equal height to Francis Ngannou, and then they're facing off, and Francis Ngannou is like a head taller. And everyone talks about how Justin Gaethje is enormous, and that's Dustin Poirier is billed as being 5'9", and Justin Gaethje is 5'11". If you go back and watch the Poirier versus Gaethje fight, Dustin Poirier is gigantic compared to Gaethje. He's a lot huger. He's a lot more massive. Or at the very least equal size with a much broader back. So it's all just a crock of shit. It's all bullshit. The one thing I kind of believe is that Justin Gaethje cuts a lot less weight than a lot of lightweights. Doesn't seem like he's not the most jacked fighter. He's not very muscular. He just looks in shape and athletic. And one of the problems I've had with Gage's performance in this one, which contributed to a lot of the jank, I think he was like, I presume he was very concerned about wrestling offense of Chandler's, and hence why he lowered his level, much like he did against Khabib, and fought from this crouch. And whenever Chandler came darting in with his blitzes, Gaethje would lower his level way down and try to meet a Chandler head to head. Which makes sense, I guess, for wrestling, but it created lots of opportunities for Chandler to land good counters in the pocket and just generally land very good shots. Because Gaethje would like throw a lead right and lunge forward, leading with his face, concerned about meeting Chandler's wrestling offense head to head, and Chandler would use that as his opportunity to land the left hook or a right hand or an uppercut in certain cases. But it's the issues were kind of mirrored for both, because Chandler was also like fighting taller than he normally does, because Gaethje is just so much taller. He's like a head taller, I think, and or at least half a head taller. Just bigger, rangier. So Chandler was fighting taller, and whenever he darted in with his right hand to the gut that he usually throws and body jabs. First of all, fighting taller opened up a lot of left hook and right hand counters for Justin, and whenever Chandler darted in like crouching low, that's when Gage's uppercut came in. The uppercut with which he almost finished Michael Chandler at one point in the fight. It looked kind of comical, honestly. Gaethje threw this massive uppercut and Chandler like went flying, kind of like in the beginning of the intro to Batman, the animated series, where Batman throws an uppercut and the guy goes like in this hyperbolic trajectory in this arc and lands flat on his back. That's what happened. And this is what happened here. But overall, just insane fight. Insane balls to the wall action from the opening bell. Gaethje took center cage. Didn't concede space for no reason. There were moments where he like a sort of backpedal, but it was usually during Chandler's blitzes. I would much prefer if he pivoted, but then again, no one really knows how to pivot in MMA, so I guess it's kind of like kind of forgivable. One thing I have to point out about people are confused about Michael Chandler's durability, and everyone is now talking about how maybe Justin Gaethje's power is overrated. And I don't believe that's the case. I think it's just a byproduct of Justin Gaethje's mechanics. They're just really janky, and they dissipate a lot of the power. Justin Gaethje doesn't really look to land. Doesn't really look for specific openings. He doesn't really sneak shots around the guard. Doesn't really make sure the shots he's throwing. Basically, you can't see his shots coming. That's why people don't get sparked out with single connections. Justin Gaethje is still a gigantic, massive, like fuck off huge hitter. He has that crushing, thudding power that makes your arms go numb whenever he connects on your arms. That's how powerful he is. But the thing is, Gaethje wings shots in that stun just about anyone he fights, but they don't like flat out put them on their ass when they're tough enough. However, whenever he manages to find those clean connections, he flatlines people. Like, if you go back and watch the Tony fight, Gaethje connected with the left hook on Tony's mouth a lot, which obviously had a lot of power and stunned Tony, but it didn't make him so much as stumble, essentially. However, when Justin threw an overhand to Tony's temple, Tony immediately did the chicken dance. He just... Gaethje's punches are just not as unexpected as they are with certain other fighters, and he's not that quick. He's very explosive, but he's not that quick. It's very weird. It kind of like has the he has the snap, but the sort of like smooth quickness isn't there. And what do I mean by smooth quickness? It's like some you can watch Dustin Poirier land combinations on someone, like whenever he lets loose along the cage, and all the punches just come in like so fluently, so easily. Okay, one punch flows into the other one. That's what I mean about smooth quickness. And Justin Gaethje's shots are very come at you incredibly fast, but he loads up on them. It's kind of like, and then the shot comes in. You have this split second where you can kind of see him loading up, and that's when you kind of sort of can brace yourself for the immediate world of hurt that you're gonna find yourself in, which kind of alleviates the damage a little bit. It's like his mechanics and shot selection basically like frequently handicap his own power. Like the much vaunted left hook for one. Everyone talks about I've talked about this before, I think. He's got great timing on it, great reactions with it. Always pretty much every time he throws it, he connects on something, and it serves a good, like a real purpose. He's got an understanding on when he should throw the left hook, but he often flings it out like a clothesline, which dissipates a lot of the power, and sometimes he lands like with the inside of his palm and not his knuckles. He doesn't bring the hook across his opponent's jaw by turning his elbow like over, parallel to the ground. It remains turned downward, and Conor Rubish talks about how it makes it easier to sneak the hook within someone's guard. And yes, it's true, but also Justin Gaethje doesn't really do that often. Sometimes he just flings it out. And if he were to turn his elbow over, he could still be able to sneak the shot around the guard, not from within the guard, but around the guard, and still like snap his opponent's jaw around and finish them. With that amount of power, he should be sparking people left and right with his left hook. And he connected with some real good left hooks on Chandler, but he didn't quite knock him out. And then in the third round, like Chandler basically just started playing to the crowd after getting clattered for much of the fight. He stunned Gagey multiple times in the fight, but it's nothing that Gagey hasn't dealt with before, and so he was able to navigate that while still throwing back, which is kind of impressive. So Chandler started playing to the crowd, like moving forward with his hands down, eating shots, pointing at Gagey, all that bullshit, throwing like spinning kicks. You know the drill. If you watched MMA for any lengthy period of time, you understand how fighters sometimes try to psych their opponents out into thinking that they're way less tired and hurt than they actually are. And the way to do that is to usually like pretend that you're not being hurt by strikes and to throw spinning attacks. And Gagey, what interested me is that Gagey had multiple moments where he could throw a really hurting counter. But he didn't, because each time he took superior positioning relative to Chandler, but he wouldn't throw. And something we saw against Tony, where in the fifth and final round, obviously, he beat the ever-living mother of fuck out of Tony. But mostly all he was throwing was jabs. Didn't throw any of his power shots. And by the end, he was like looking at Tony like, for fuck's sake, oh my god, what am I doing? You could see just the concern and like the almost sort of disgust, this disgust at himself for like being forced to do this against another fellow human being. So I guess maybe it's the case of there is equal possibility for this being the case of Gagey just displaying being conservative to make sure he doesn't like shits the fight, and like coasting on the enormous lead that he's built up, or perhaps it's him showing compassion. I don't know. Maybe it's both. Interesting either way. One thing Chandler has done that has impressed me is that he's done a good job. He's done a decent job of defending the leg kicks. because Justin was looking to land the calf kick most of the time, and I think that's probably because of Chandler being so much shorter than him, and having the possibility of his kick sliding upwards and Chandler catching it for the takedown. But Chandler has done a good job of turning his shin outwards to at least attempt to check it. I mean, obviously, the more effective and less painful way to check the calf kick is to raise your leg and then turn your shin inwards, so the kick slides down your shin, slides down the outside part of your shin, and dissipates a lot of the power of the calf kick. And but in this one, he kind of like put his foot outwards, and the Gaethje was forced to make a shin to shin connection. It still hurts like fuck, but it probably hurt Gaethje more than Chandler, I think. But then Gaethje just basically started taking over and started closing the exchanges with the kick. It's impressive. What's impressive is that I expected Chandler's leg to basically like fall off at a certain point in the fight, but it didn't. And Chandler always had this weird issue with his front foot whenever he got kicked. Especially when he got kicked, he kind of like be sent flying in the direction of the kick, and it would like go dead immediately after a couple. Maybe he spent a lot of time. Maybe he spent most of his camp conditioning his shins. I don't know. But there was also a really funny sequence where Chandler like raised Gaethje up in the air and took him down, and then slammed his forehead into the canvas and almost knocked out himself. Almost knocked out himself by performing the takedown. After which Gaethje just immediately scrambled and took Chandler's back while he was in turtle and started hammering him with grounded pound. Gaethje's hips. I've always ascribed to the idea that I've always thought that Gaethje's hips are really good. They're incredibly quick. His initial defensive reaction in wrestling is really, really good. It's his chain wrestling that's probably the main culprit, the main hole in his takedown defense. But in this fight, Chandler just basically couldn't press his wrestling at all. Couldn't take Gaethje down at all. Like the one instance was the one where he raised Gaethje up in the air and then tried to slam him down. But Gaethje has this sort of density. Ed Gallo talked about this a lot, in that Gaethje kind of has this Dan Henderson-esque density to him, where you can be sure that being thrown around wouldn't really hurt Justin at all. And he's really good at scrambling from underneath fighters, using Granbys and all that kind of stuff, fat man rolls. And this is what happened. I think this would have also happened had Chandler not knocked himself out by landing head first after taking Gaethje down. Anyway, excellent fight, really great. Just even crazier on the rewatch. The reason why this took so long to make compared to some of my other podcasts and post-fight breakdowns is that I wanted to actually like rewatch everything that happened there. Well, I wanted to rewatch Chandler versus Gaethje mainly. Also, the reason why I'm comparing this to Gagey Alvarez is that Chandler actually went to the body a lot. He essentially shoe-shined Gaethje's body. And Gaethje started doing a good job of defending those body shots at a certain point, but still, it's kind of like a historical problem for Gagey in that Chandler was a lot quicker. And so fighters who have a speed advantage on Gagey kind of like have an easier time manipulating his guard and sneaking shots around, and maybe countering him in the pocket mid-exchange. Because a lot of Gaethje's defensive reactions are still very exaggerated. He still ducks down dramatically. He still kind of takes his eyes off his opponent whenever he covers up and evades punches, starts evading punches. He's trying. You could see it in him attempting to enter range while moving his head. It's kind of like the ultimate. He's a little confused, but he's got the spirit type performance from Gagey. You could see that he was trying to tie his usual looks and his usual pressure to his newfound skills that he's acquired recently. The clinch exchanges were still on point. The single collar tie uppercuts were still there. Hockey fighting Gagey, always a joy to watch. In fact, I kind of come to think of it, I think Gaethje would do really well if he were suddenly to if he were to focus on his dirty boxing and become like this really nasty infighter. I think this would serve him much better than his current style, which works really well, but still, maybe something to think about. Yeah, just I really missed Justin Gaethje. I think that's the main takeaway here. The man is must-watch TV. And the reason why I enjoy Justin Gaethje is not because he's like the best in the world, or because he's elite, or because he's a pound-for-pound talent and all that kind of bullshit. He very arguably may not be all these things, but he's just incredibly fun. I do not remember a single fight which featured Justin Gaethje that I didn't enjoy. Also, they've shown Paddy Pimblett in the crowd that night, and he looked incredibly fat. What I suggest they should do is feed Paddy Pimblett to Justin Gaethje. Just do it. It's gonna be fun. I want to see Justin Gaethje knock somebody out cold. It's an endless source of entertainment. If Justin Gaethje never fought for the belt again and continued fighting like up and comers and like laying them completely out, I would be a happy man. I mean, it would suck for Justin Gaethje, I guess, but it's still gonna be like a tremendous fun. But let's not write him off. I think he still has a shot at giving a really tough fight to Chucky Olives and Dustin Poirier. The rematch will likely be like completely electric still. And against Chucky Olives, Chucky Olives still has some certain tendencies that may allow Justin find an avenue where he can bomb Oliveira. Either way, I don't really care. I don't really care if he wins or loses. I just want to see Justin put on entertaining fights in the future. See him more often. I would not enjoy seeing him take another year-long break, or like a forced exile, something like that. Alright, I suppose that's enough of that. I didn't watch the prelims. Really have no interest in catching up on them. I know that Chris Barnett knocked out Fat Jan Vellante with a spinning kick. I guess good for him. Yeah, no interest in the rest of that stuff. Then Albert, in his Stuff Picks article, actually nailed the dynamic to Michael Chandler versus Justin Gaethje, and he also nailed a lot of the dynamics in the rest of the fights and on the full preview to this card. So even though the card already happened and we know the outcomes, I still suggest you go back and listen to his and Fenio's preview for this card and read the Stuff Picks article. There's some interesting stuff in there. Some interesting dynamics were pointed out. And it's just kind of for validation, to just show off how big everyone's brain is at the fight site. And yeah, subscribe to our Patreon. $3 gives you access to all of our stuff that we've released over the years, alternate commentary, fight breakdowns, exclusive podcasts, all that kind of stuff. $5 per month, you can join our Discord and talk to staff and talk to like-minded fight fans, have some actual in-depth discussion about fighters and about fights and fighting in general. Or maybe you just want to have some fun and shitpost and meme about things. So that's perfectly acceptable as well. There's everyone in our Discord is pretty much either like an up-and-coming analyst, an analytical prospect, or a meme lord, or maybe both. So it's a fun place. It's a cozy place. I suggest you join. I'm also incredibly active in there. I'm there pretty much every day. I pop in once like every day to check some messages, talk to people, because I just really enjoy talking to these people. They're kind of like they're more like friends rather than subscribers or followers or paying customers. I mean that as well, and I would like to have more paying customers because this is the source of the primary source of my income. It's not much by most metrics, by most reasonable metrics, but it counts as actual money over here in Russia. So if you don't want me to fucking die from starvation, subscribe to our Patreon. Give us money. Give us your money. Feed Iggy. Hashtag feed Iggy on Twitter. Alright. Another one of those really like rambly and shambolic stream of consciousness episodes, but you should be used to it by now. I'm planning on putting out more organized and like airtight episodes and case studies in the future. Very possibly this week, or maybe basically during this month. I kind of intend to up my output a little bit. I'm probably not going to be able to match the mad dash that was my summer, where I would just basically not sleep at all and continuously put out content that tackled incredibly hard and incredibly hard topics, and where I discussed them in depth with multiple guests. This took a lot of preparation and a lot of writing from me, and next to no sleep. And I don't quite want to. I don't wish to do a repeat of that. I kind of want to remain a healthy, functioning human that isn't psychotic. Yeah, but anyway, just telling you to watch out for some of the stuff that I'm going to put out. It's probably going to be really fascinating. All right, you were listening to TENGRIDOME. You know who I am, and yeah, we're done. Words cannot express my joy at the fact that the Church of Gagey is the gates to the Church of Gagey are once again open. It just warms my heart.